June of 1978. High in the remote wilderness of the Sierra Nevada mountains, two Forest Service workers pushed through the melting snow slush of Plumas National Forest. They were checking on remote federal properties after one of the worst winter storms in California history, nearly 20 miles from the nearest paved road. At an elevation over 4,000 feet, they spotted a small, corrugated metal trailer known as Shelter 19.5. As they approached, the air was turning warm with spring, but a suffocating sense of dread hung over the clearing. One of the trailer's windows had been shattered from the outside. Stepping through the doorway, the Rangers were hit by a heavy, stagnant cold and the dark, metallic scent of decay. On a small cot in the corner, tucked neatly beneath 8 heavy woolen blankets, lay the emaciated body of 32-year-old Ted Weiher. The sight was horrific. Ted, a man who had left his home 4 months earlier, weighing over 200 pounds, was reduced to a frail 85 pounds. His beard had grown long and matted. His feet were black and destroyed by extreme frostbite. Medical examiners would later determine that Ted had survived inside that dark metal box, cold, starving, and alone, for anywhere between 8 and 13 weeks. But what baffled investigators wasn't just how Ted died. It was what sat untouched in the room around him. Right next to his bed was an open locker containing 36 military C-ration meals. Only 12 had been opened. 24 cans of high-calorie food remained completely intact. Outside the trailer stood a massive propane tank, fully filled and connected to the building's heating system, requiring only the turn of a simple valve to flood the room with heat. In a nearby shed, stacked to the ceiling, was dry firewood, paper, and matches. Ted Weiher had slowly frozen and starved to death, surrounded by everything he needed to survive, and he hadn't walked into those mountains alone. 4 months earlier, on the night of Friday, February 24th, 1978, Ted and 4 of his closest friends had vanished into the pitch-black mountain air. So, who were the 5 young men who vanished into the freezing night? First, there was 32-year-old Ted Weiher, the tall, gentle giant of the group with a warm smile and a childlike innocence. Second, 26-year-old Jack Madruga, a proud Army veteran who was fiercely protective of his friends and obsessed with his turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego. Third, 29-year-old Bill Sterling, a quiet, deeply religious man who spent most of his time reading the Bible or going on peaceful fishing trips. Fourth, 24-year-old Jack Hewitt, the youngest and most soft-spoken of the group, who looked up to Ted Weiher like a big brother. And fifth, 25-year-old Gary Mathias, an Army veteran who had served overseas, a man managing schizophrenia with daily medication, who brought confidence and military experience to the group. Together, they were known in their hometown of Yuba City simply as the Boys. They were not adventurous survivalists. They were gentle, routine-bound men who lived with their parents, relied on their families, and shared an incredible, passionate bond over one thing: basketball. They played together for the Gateway Gators, a local team for athletes with special needs. And on Friday, February 24th, 1978, they set out on a journey that would turn into one of the most chilling mysteries in American history. This is the story of the Yuba County Five. To understand the baffling nature of this mystery, you have to understand the 5 men who stepped into the woods that night, in their quiet hometown of Yuba City, California. They were affectionately known by their families simply as the Boys. ranging in age from 24 to 32. All 5 men lived with their parents. 4 of them lived with mild intellectual disabilities, while the 5th suffered from treated schizophrenia. They were not street-smart or adventurous survivalists. They were gentle, routine-bound men who relied heavily on their families, their community, and each other. 32-year-old Ted Weiher was the gentle giant of the group, standing over 6 feet tall. Ted was known for his warm smile, his helpful nature, and a childlike innocence. He worked odd jobs, loved family gatherings, and was fiercely attached to his daily routines. Jack Madruga, 26 years old, was a proud U.S. Army veteran. Though he had learning difficulties, his military service had instilled in him a strong sense of discipline and independence. Jack was fiercely protective of his friends, and he was particularly obsessed with his prized possession, a turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego sedan. He washed it constantly, drove it with extreme care, and never let anyone else sit behind the wheel. Bill Sterling, 29, was quiet, deeply religious, and spent most of his time reading the Bible or going on peaceful fishing trips with his father. He was a gentle soul who avoided confrontation at all costs. 24-year-old Jack Hewitt was the youngest of the group, hesitant and soft-spoken. Jack suffered from the most severe intellectual impairment of the 5. He relied heavily on the older men, particularly Ted Weiher, whom he shadowed like a big brother. And then there was 25-year-old Gary Mathias. Gary was the outlier of the group. Unlike the others, Gary had served overseas in West Germany with the U.S. Army. While deployed, he developed severe schizophrenia and experienced violent psychotic episodes, leading to a psychiatric discharge. However, after returning home, Gary was put on a strict regimen of daily antipsychotic medication. With his illness managed, Gary became stable, helpful, and highly active. He bonded quickly with the other 4 men. What brought these 5 distinct personalities together was a shared, passionate love for basketball. They played together for the Gateway Gators, a local team formed for mentally challenged athletes. Basketball gave them structure, pride, and a deep brotherhood. Friday, February 24th, 1978, was a night of immense excitement. The very next morning, Saturday, the Gateway Gators were scheduled to play in a major regional Special Olympics tournament in Sacramento. The winners would receive trophy jackets. On Friday afternoon, the boys were practically buzzing with energy. Their uniforms were washed, folded, and laid out neatly on their beds. Their gym bags were packed by the front door. Alarm clocks were set. Their parents later recalled that none of the men could stop talking about the big game. At around 6 p.m. that evening, Jack Madruga backed his pristine Mercury Montego out of the driveway. All 5 men piled in. They were driving 50 miles north along Highway 99 to the town of Chico to watch a college basketball game between UC Davis and CSU Chico. It was meant to be a fun road trip to get pumped up for their own tournament the next day. They arrived in Chico, watched the game, and cheered from the stands. The game ended around 10 p.m. As they left the arena, Madruga drove the Montego a few blocks away to Bears Market, a brightly lit convenience store in downtown Chico. The store clerk working the night shift later gave police a detailed account of their visit. He remembered the 5 men clearly because of how cheerful and animated they were. They bought a small feast of junk food, Hostess snack pies, chocolate bars, cartons of milk, and several cans of Pepsi. At approximately 10:15 p.m., they paid for their snacks, walked out into the cold night air, and got back into Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego. The route back home to City was simple. It was a straight, well-lit, 45-minute drive south along Highway 99, a highway they had driven dozens of times before. Their parents expected them back in their beds before midnight, well-rested for their 8 a.m. tournament assembly. They pulled out of the Bears Market parking lot and were never seen alive again. Instead of turning south onto Highway 99 toward home, Jack Madruga turned the Mercury Montego northeast, away from the highway, away from the city lights, and straight toward the dark, winding ascent leading into the Plumas National Forest. Why would 5 men, dressed in light windbreakers and thin sneakers, leave a smooth highway and drive directly up a remote, unpaved mountain road into an oncoming winter storm? When morning broke on Saturday, February 25th, 5 families awoke to a nightmare. The basketball uniforms remained untouched on the beds. The alarm clocks rang in empty rooms. By Saturday afternoon, local sheriff's departments were alerted, and a multi-county missing persons investigation was launched. For 4 agonizing days, not a single trace of the 5 men, or the turquoise Mercury Montego, could be found. Until February 28th, when a forest ranger patrolling a snow-covered logging road near Mountain House, at an elevation of 4,400 feet, spotted Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego. It was parked nearly 70 miles away from Chico, and 45 miles off any logical route back home. When police detectives arrived, the scene presented an immediate puzzle. The car was sitting in snowdrifts, but it was not stuck. When an officer turned the key left in the ignition, the engine roared to life instantly. The gas tank was still a quarter full. Investigators examined its undercarriage, and what they found left them dumbfounded. The mountain road was a rough, unpaved logging trail, full of deep ruts and boulders. Yet, the low-slung undercarriage of the Montego did not have a single dent, scrape, or mud splatter. It was as if someone had driven the car up that pitch-black mountain road with surgical precision. Inside, police found snack wrappers from Bears Market. The driver's side window had been left rolled down roughly 2 inches. The doors were unlocked. Why had 5 men, wearing only light jackets, abandoned a fully operational, warm automobile in a freezing mountain wilderness? Then, a witness came forward with a terrifying story. 55-year-old Joseph Shawns told police that on the night the men vanished, his truck had gotten stuck in a snowdrift on that exact road. While trying to free it, Shawns suffered a mild heart attack and retreated into his truck cab to keep warm. Around midnight, Shawns saw headlights approach and park behind him. He saw flashlight beams moving through the dark, heard men's voices, and distinctly heard what sounded like a woman holding a crying baby. When Shawns shouted into the night for help, the flashlights went dark, the headlights cut out, and the mountain fell into dead silence. Search teams attempted to comb the area, but a severe winter blizzard rolled over the mountains, dumping several feet of fresh snow. The ground search was called off. The mountains held their secrets fast until the spring thaw. For 4 long months, the families lived in agonizing limbo. Spring slowly arrived in Northern California, and by late May 1978, the thick snowpacks of Plumas National Forest finally began to melt. On June 4th, 1978, the discovery of Ted Weiher's body inside trailer 19.5 shocked investigators. Ted had survived inside the cold shelter for weeks, starving to death despite being surrounded by unopened sea rations, dry firewood, and a full propane tank. Police found Gary Mathias' tennis shoes inside the trailer, while Ted's leather shoes were gone. This proved Gary Mathias had been in the trailer with Ted. Investigators theorized that Ted's feet had become severely frostbitten, leaving him unable to move, while Gary may have put on Ted's shoes after his own feet swelled. The discovery of Ted's body prompted a massive search of the surrounding woods. Hundreds of searchers swept through the melting wilderness. The gruesome answers came quickly. On June 6th, searchers sweeping a dirt road 11.5 miles from where the car was abandoned, roughly halfway to the trailer, found the skeletal remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling. Scavenged by wildlife, their remains showed no signs of foul play. Medical examiners concluded they had succumbed to hypothermia, collapsing in the snow during that brutal 19-mile walk through the blizzard. 2 days later, on June 8th, Jack Hewitt's father, who had joined the search party, personally found his son's remains beneath a manzanita bush about 2 miles from the trailer. 4 of the 5 men had now been accounted for, 3 frozen in the wilderness, 1 starved inside a shelter, which left only 1 man unaccounted for, Gary Mathias. Search teams combed every square foot of forest around trailer 19.5 using bloodhounds, metal detectors, and heat imaging helicopters. They found Gary's jacket miles away, but Gary Mathias himself, his body, his bones, or his clothing, had completely vanished without a trace. Decades have passed, and the fate of Gary Mathias remains the dark heart of the Yuba County 5 mystery. As an Army veteran diagnosed with schizophrenia, Gary relied on daily psychiatric medication to maintain stability. That medication had been left at his home in Yuba City. Psychiatrists explained that without his medicine, Gary's mental health would have deteriorated rapidly within 48 to 72 hours, triggering severe paranoia or psychosis. This medical fact birthed several competing theories. Theory number 1, the psychotic episode and fatal misdirection. Perhaps Gary suffered a sudden mental breakdown on the drive home. He had friends in the nearby mountain town of Forbestown and may have guided the group up the road by mistake. When the car hit snowdrifts, panic set in. Gary's paranoid delusions may have convinced him they were in danger, and his friends, trusting his military background implicitly, followed him into the freezing dark. Theory number 2, third-party foul play. What about the witness testimony of Joseph Shawns? What about the second vehicle, the flashlights, and the woman with the crying baby? Some believe the 5 men were chased or threatened by unknown pursuers at a gas station or store. Forced off the highway, they fled into the pitch-black woods to escape a human threat, only to be trapped and killed by the brutal environment. This would explain why Ted Weiher never lit a fire in the trailer. He was terrified of giving away his position. And theory number 3, the lost group and cognitive collapse. Perhaps there was no crime or madness, only a disastrous wrong turn. Disoriented in the storm, the men stepped out when the car encountered snowdrifts. As they walked miles through the freezing dark, hypothermia set in. Hypothermia causes profound confusion and memory loss. By the time they reached the trailer, their minds were so shattered by cold that they simply lost the ability to figure out how to open the propane valve or light a fire. Despite decades of searching, not a single bone or personal item belonging to Gary Mathias has ever been found. He vanished into the Sierra Nevada wilderness like a ghost. What do you believe happened on that dark night in February 1978? Was it a tragic series of errors, a mental breakdown, or something far more sinister? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you found this deep dive engaging, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into history's most chilling mysteries. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.